Hello and welcome to Garden as Well. I am on my way to visit a really good friend of mine and help her in her garden. Now, it's a place I come to fairly often, and it's a place that over the years has been great for me to really get stuck in and do some proper gardening whilst I didn't have my own garden. But it's not any old garden, this, as you'll see. Coming up on today's programme.
Best known for her vegetable growing prowess, Rekha reveals how she had lots to learn when it came to ornamentals.
What I learned really early on is the detail in every plant. What height will they be? What colour will they give me when they do bloom? What leaf structure are they? But more importantly, when you put them together, what are they going to look like?
We meet a couple who discovered a geological surprise in their garden and were determined to embrace its natural charm.
We decided to make a feature of it, and it's now part of our garden.
A great part of our garden. The best part. My connection to the underworld.
And Toby's in Shropshire, visiting a garden with a dazzling display of delphiniums.
The undisputed stars of the summer borders here. Now, of all the flower spikes or inflorescence you can grow, well, it's foxgloves, veronicastrum or verbascum, delphiniums have by far the most heft, and all the rest look, well, reedy by comparison.
And I was starting a brand new herb garden, amongst other things. Come on then.
Powderham Castle, located on the banks of the River Exe near Exeter.
It's home to a walled garden, and part of that is run by my really good friend Jeanette. Over the last 5 years, she's turned it into her dream project. And she's very like me, so she likes growing edibles, but also some medicinals and some ornamentals as well. And I've often come and helped out with some of the projects that need 2 people or a bit of an extra hand. So I've always felt really at home here. I have to say, I absolutely love it. And so does Rua.
For the last 5 years, Jeanette has worked tirelessly to transform what was an overgrown, unloved garden into a productive learning space, valued by volunteers and community groups alike. I'll be returning throughout the year to share some of my knowledge and work on some key garden projects with Jeanette and help her to take this community market garden to the next level.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
The garden looks lovely, doesn't it? It does look lovely. It looks really, really nice.
I can't wait to show you around.
Hello, Russ. You right, Russ? Hey. Oh.
Hello, Roo.
What's the plan for today?
Do you remember I planted raspberries along the wall there? Because I had this sort of picture of them growing up over the wall and producing beautiful fruit.
Yeah.
It's never happened.
Okay.
So I want to take them out from over there and put them into my new fruit garden.
Okay, that sounds like
Is that okay?
Let's do it.
That's fantastic.
Come on, Roo. Come on.
Come on, Russ. We're going along here. I've got to find the raspberries.
Oh, I see them.
Yeah. And they're dotted along here for this fabulous display that has
Okay.
never really worked.
So it's just digging them up and getting them ready for replanting.
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
That is a pleasure.
Thank you. See you later.
See you in a bit.
Come on, Russ. Come on. Good boy.
Now these are autumn raspberries that I had growing on my allotment, and they're very prolific. They're a really wonderful crop to grow actually if you like summer fruits, which I do, because they're very easy. You get summer raspberries and autumn raspberries, and the difference is that the summer ones fruit on the previous year's growth, whereas the autumn ones fruit on this year's growth, so you can cut them back each year, and they fruit a little bit later, as the name suggests. Raspberries are actually an edge species, so they grow in hedgerows or at the edges of woodland. They like to be a bit cooler. So against this south-facing wall where it's really baking, that's why these fruits have not done so well. They're not dead, but they're just not putting on fruits. So this is this year's growth, which is really vigorous and green, whereas last year's growth, you can see it's got a brown stem and already has little raspberries forming on the end of that stem. You don't have to prune them each year, but if you don't, the growth will get weedier and less upright. So I'm going to give this one a bit of a prune now. So I'm taking last year's stem all the way down to the ground, and then this year's one, because I'm moving it, I'm going to take some of that growth out. If you move something in the spring or the autumn is the best time to do that. But as it gets warmer, it puts them under more stress. So this, if it's all trying to grow and its roots have been disturbed, will really struggle to establish. Instead, I take the top off it, that reduces the stress, then I can move it. Autumn raspberries are fairly tough, so this should be fine. So keep the roots really, really wet until it's planted. The great thing about gardening is that there's always more to learn, and working and volunteering in all different kinds of gardens is a great way to do that. That's what I've been doing whenever I come here. And another gardener who knows all about that is our own Rekha.
On the edge of the Thames, in the heart of London, is a deeply historic garden. It's flanked by barristers' chambers and the busy London Embankment. But there has been a garden and gardeners here since the 1300s, and I have been lucky enough to be one of them. I came here first as a volunteer. I had experience growing vegetables in my youth and had my allotment. But I had very little knowledge about flowers, ornamentals, shrubs, and how to put them together. I was doing my RHS exams at the time. I'd be at college one day, and the next day I'd turn up with my head full of questions. I arrived at a great time as the head gardener, Sean Harkin, was busy creating the meadows and the new borders. Hey, Sean.
Hey.
Good to see you. Shall we sit there?
Yeah.
Sean, I haven't been here in the month of May for 2 years. It's looking absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, thanks, Rekha. Do you remember when we first met?
Yeah.
And I think we did meet at a side gate and we kind of did a loop of the garden. And we walked up past that border. There was bedding there and the roses and the yew hedges.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
yes, all along
and then there was a big tree circle around the cedar. Just a big empty, kind of dark circle of bark. And then we had to edge it all the time.
All the time.
And the same, the liriodendron, that was 3 tree circles.
Yes, that's
that we
right.
then turned into that big bed. And then you kind of came around the corner and there was kind of formal lawn and there was rose beds.
Yes. But now the garden and the sloped lawn is very different. Just along here with all the wildflowers coming down, I just absolutely love this. It's come leaps and bounds. I love the way it swathes all the way through. So it's not just one place, you've got it everywhere around. The shade planting under the trees is simple and clever. A mix here of white valerian, oxeye daisy and persicaria, red dragon. So was this your vision, Sean?
It's getting there.
Yeah?
I mean, the buildings are so impressive. They can be quite imposing at the same time.
Yes.
So we really want the garden to soften the historic buildings and to kind of push back at them and say, the buildings are great, but so is the plants.
It's complementing each other and it feels very welcoming.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, that's something. Because as well as being open to the public, people live here and we wanted to make it feel less parky, more gardeny was the idea.
Doing good. It's really looking good.
Thanks, Rekha.
To make it more welcoming for people and wildlife, there are seeds tucked in corners and pollinator-friendly plants left to self-seed. I love this sundial structure. It's very formal, but it's very soft. The planting around it is all with erigeron, and this is a lovely touch. I really like this. Terracotta pots against a hard structure. It just softens the look. It was planting up the new areas that my learning really took off. Sean chose the plants, but we got to place them. What I learned really early on is the detail in every plant. What height will they be? What colour will they give me when they do bloom? What leaf structure are they? But more importantly, when you put them together, what are they going to look like? And it was all these little details I needed to learn. I studied each one individually, and it worked. This is a lovely combination. The spires of the foxgloves against the purple, but if you look through the foxgloves, you've got the cardoons, the really glaucous leaves. And then you've got the vitis at the back. There is so many colours, so many textures, and it's absolutely lovely. Bringing softer planting into the historic garden took a lot of skill, and the edges of the borders and lawns play a big part. On this side of the path, the lawn edge is kept as sharp as a knife, but on the other side, the borders plants are allowed to spill over. So the formal and the informal come together, they match and they marry and mingle really well. I love border spillage and use it at home, but that path trick wasn't the only one. One of the best tips I learned working in an ornamental garden is that if the paths are kept clean, weed-free and tidy, then the whole garden looks great, even though you haven't touched it. One thing we definitely did touch was the pond. We worked in teams, planting a yew hedge right round it with inner texture. And it's grown well. But probably my favourite place was the greenhouse. Quite early on, Sean asked me to pot up some succulents. He knew I didn't like succulents, but he goes, do half a dozen of these and you will like them. And he was right. I now have succulents in my own garden. There are so many different varieties, and when you put them together, the combination gives you a display in itself. Inner Temple has taught me to be a much braver gardener. I think you have to be brave when you want to try something different. And maybe that confidence came from the succulents.
I really do think that if you want to learn how to garden, the best thing you can do is find a garden and volunteer in it and learn from all the amazing experts that work in them. And that obviously shows with Rekha. As well as that though, the relationship that she's built with Sean is lovely to see. And I think that's what gardening can do, bring people together so they can share their knowledge and sometimes their plants too. I've got some raspberries for you.
Oh, lovely.
This looks amazing. It's completely changed.
I know it has, isn't it? So along here, we're going to have rhubarb. Then we're having a row of gooseberries. And then the raspberries are going in along this row here. Along the back there, we've got some fruit trees, but I'm planning to grow them in a fan against the wall.
Well, shall I plant these ones and then come and help you with the fruit trees?
Okay, that'll be lovely.
Cool. All right then.
Thank you.
This is lovely soil, and transplanting anything into lovely soil like this is pretty easy. All you have to do is get it in the ground, firm it all in and give it a really, really good water, especially if the weather is hot. They should be very happy here with a bit of shade from this tree. And there we go. I am following the line, but the raspberries will not stay where they're put. They tend to run. Especially autumn raspberries, they'll go far and wide. So you can plant them in a container if you don't want that to happen, or you could put something in the ground to stop the runners from going too far, or you could just mow them. So here, That grass will get mown and it will stop them from suckering too much, but just remember that raspberries tend not to do what they're told. But I quite like that about them. We're pushing the optimum time of year for moving plants now. These should be absolutely fine, but the crucial thing will be watering them really well for the first year until they've established. If you are moving raspberries, or if you're planting raspberries and cutting them back, don't expect a really good yield this year. It'll probably be next year when you get your first big harvest from them. What have you got?
I've got a cherry, a pear, an apple, and a fig.
You got the fig there,
Yeah,
and then do you have a preference where the other ones go?
absolutely not. It's whatever you think. It's like, you know, I'll just take it as it comes. When I met Frances, we used to work together, working with adults with a learning disability in a horticultural charity, and just seemed to hit it off. I'm quite happy for you to decide where they're going to go.
Too much responsibility.
I think I probably lack confidence rather than knowledge, and occasionally when I get a little bit stuck with it all, she does give me advice if I ask for it, or she'll just make us suggestions as what can be done.
What about fig, apple, cherry, pear, plum?
Yeah.
So you'd have lovely early blossom and early blossom, and then in between you'd have later blossom and later blossom.
Perfect.
Okay.
Absolutely perfect. It's great that we do have this relationship and this love of horticulture. However, our conversation isn't 100% about horticulture, and we still get on really well.
I'm just preparing this hole for a cherry tree, and we're leaving the weeds in because by leaving nettles and some other flowering weeds here, we're bringing in butterflies and other pollinators too that will hopefully pollinate the tree, and you'll have high yield. But also with planting fruit trees, there are some where you need to have 2 or more, so 2 apples or 2 pears in order to get cross-pollination. So that's something to bear in mind if you are growing fruits. But this is a cherry. If you had to ask me what my favourite fruit tree is, it would maybe be a cherry or a plum. And they're so beautiful, that's the main reason. They blossom on bare stems rather than with their leaves, and then they produce really delicious fruits. Cherries have really amazing autumn colour as well, so for a small garden, they're a really good tree. What we'll do is we'll plant them a little bit away from the wall and lean them back in. And that just means pruning any stems that are going the wrong way before we lean them in. So I think that's the flattest plane, and then I will begin to prune off the branches that come off that flat plane. Now, with cherries and with plums, they do not like to be pruned in the winter. If you do prune them in the winter, they are prone to a disease called silver leaf. So a summer prune is best, which means now is the perfect time to begin pruning cherries and plums. Now we are off to meet a couple who have made a really unique garden by embracing the features that it naturally had.
Most people would think if they found a big hole in the ground in their garden that they would have to fill it in or just cover it up. But no, we decided to make a feature of it, and it's now part of our garden.
A great part of our garden. The best part. My connection to the underworld.
I'm Jo.
And I'm Richard.
And we live in Wollerton, which is up in North Lancashire.
The garden is a small 10 metre by 10 metre triangle where we try to pack as much as possible into every inch of space.
We moved in about 17 years ago. A bit of renovation work required on the house, and in the process exposed this beautiful bedrock limestone. I got a little bit carried away, and lo and behold, it started dipping down towards perhaps a cave entrance. My pastime, I live to cave. I couldn't just stop merely exposing what we had. I had to find out whether there was something deeper, something hidden. The hole does go down at least another couple of metres because the cat will jump in and disappear, turn around and come back out. There's a variety of ferns that have attached themselves to the walls. You do get the contrast between the softness of the mosses that have taken root on the limestone, and you also get the mottled effect where they've got the lichens coming through. It's just the natural mosaic, really. When it came to deciding what we should do with the feature, having exposed it, Joe thought that, yeah, we could incorporate it as a feature within the garden, plant around it, and perhaps actually put a grill over so that we can extend the patio and walk across. So even if it's a windy, horrible, wet day that I can't get out, you know you're close to the limestone, you're close to your passion caving.
One of the reasons we really like being here is because there's quite a lot of limestone in this area.
You could just see nature emerging from the limestone.
And the limestone that's in our garden is literally the continuation of that hill coming down. The garden, in essence, is a hot, sunny place. And also the thing we notice is that because we've got all these limestone walls, the stone really absorbs the heat of the sun. So sometimes after the sun's gone down in the summer, you can touch the stone and they're just radiating out this warmth. But not today. This is one of my favourite seats to sit in the garden. And I think one of the main reasons I like it is because of the view that I can see from here. It's a slope, so we created these small terraces that gently step up, and from here I can see a series of vertical lines. You've got the horizontal lines of the wall, and then you've got a horizontal line of the bright green Lysomachia, and then another horizontal line of the black grass. And that's all framed by these two vertical clumps of equisetum. It does such a good job of framing that view. For me, this sense of sitting still and looking at what's quite a static picture is something that brings me a lot of calm and enjoyment.
This area is where you get maximum sun, planted up with a lot of Mediterranean-style herbs. And then to raise the eye up, we've got the vivascums, which are looking absolutely gorgeous at the moment. I particularly love this one piece of limestone and felt it needed to be shown off. So created a circle of red brick to enhance sort of the... It's almost a miniature mountain rising up from within the circle. Whenever walking through the garden, I do always like to just pause at every step. You turn to the right, where our main border is, so much going on, so much colour. At the foreground, we've got quite a distinctive crocosmia, hellfire. And then rising up, you've got the fennels in the back, giving some height, lovely umbels, just turning to seed now.
When we are looking to decide which plants to put where, I think it's more a matter of what space have we got, really, because usually there's not very much space at all.
I'm very much more put more in, whereas Joe is, no, to get the best, you have to take something out. So that's where you have to compromise.
And is it a democracy?
Depends what day you talk to us.
Because we are in a bit of a sunken garden, and you can really, all you can see is the sky above you and the birds and the bats of a summer evening.
It's our special place that we have created, but we do love to share it with people.
I think that's brilliant, using a sinkhole to turn it into a lovely dark cave of garden. That's an amazing idea. Right, now what I'm doing here is planting a little bit of ground cover, because this is quite a weedy spot. It's got some bindweed and some other perennial weeds in it. So Jeanette has been gathering these little self-heal plants and potting them up wherever she sees them, in the hope that planting them on the ground will actually suppress some of those weeds. And it's a really nice idea. It's a nice way of covering the ground with greenery, which provides habitat for things like ground beetles, but also mulching the soil with living material. So you have greenery growing over the top, which will keep the moisture in. This is another reason why Jeanette and I get on so well, because she's grown all of these from seedlings she's found around the garden. And I love that kind of ingenuity. Self-heal Prunella vulgaris. It's a lovely native wildflower. It's got blue flowers, very good for pollinators, and it's good as ground cover. But it's an example of a herb which is more adapted to our kind of climate, which is sometimes dry, but also sometimes a little bit more soggy than the Mediterranean herbs we're used to growing. So this is a really nice one if you have a damper position or a damper area, but I grow it because it's so beautiful. I'm even thinking of growing some of this for my lawn instead of grass. You could do this with all sorts of different plants though. So if you did have a very hot and sunny dry position, something like thyme or Corsican mint would be lovely. You could use things like Muhlenbeckia that make a lovely mat along the ground. Or in a really shady position, you could use Gallium odoratum, which is a really lovely ground cover plant. But there we go, this should all knit together and hopefully really keep those weeds down. Still to come on today's programme.
Toby explores a garden with an extraordinary collection of delphiniums.
There's one in this border that really catches the eye. It's got to be Faust. I mean, it's so bright, it's almost iridescent.
And we meet an expert grower who shares his passion for bonsai.
You can have endless debates about what constitutes beauty. But when you see something beautiful, look at this tree. It's got beautiful movement, it's got form, it's got character, it's got shape, and it immediately speaks to you.
Now is the perfect time to get your climbing beans and runner beans in the ground. And Jeanette has a really nice system here, which she's trying for the first time this year, that she saw on a farm nearby, where rather than making a wigwam with a pointy top, you tie the canes in the middle so that the poles come outwards, because the beans hang in a much better way rather than all being bunched up, and theoretically the easier harvesting the beans will be. I'm just copying what she's already done down the other end, which is lay them out 30 centimetres apart, that's the spacing of the beans, and then tie a bamboo cane in, and that will keep the rigidity. This horizontal cane is about 1 metre off the ground, and that means that the width of these isn't so wide that people will do themselves any injury, because there are lots of volunteers using this garden. But in your own garden, you could make this lower, and the lower you make it, the wider that gap will be, and make harvesting even easier. Now it's just time to plant the beans. Now these are runner beans, and there are different ways that you can grow them. The easiest way is to direct sow them, but we're a little bit past that time now. End of May is ideal for that. So instead, you can still buy them in the shops. You can just buy some already grown and just plant them in the ground. And it'll be 1 bean per cane either side of the bed, and they're pretty narrow beds, and that's intentional. It's part of kind of permaculture and no dig design, where you make the beds narrow enough that you can work them without ever having to step on them. You'll also notice there's lots of weeds along the side, and that's intentional too. It's partly to stop soil erosion because the beds are mounded, so the roots of the weeds will hold the soil in position, but also it's to build habitat and biodiversity, and so you're providing lots of companion plants of native wild flowers for all the creatures that visit the garden. Now that they're planted, they are self-twining, but you might occasionally need to tie them in a little bit just to get them going. And harvest time is probably going to take a couple of months, but you can then keep harvesting them right until the frosts. And generally, the more you pick, the more they will produce. But they're a lovely crop to have in terms of soil health, because all members of the pea family have nodules on the roots that will fix nitrogen. So this is a really good crop to grow this year if next year you want to grow something that's more hungry, like a leafy green, kale or something like that. Just as a final bit of companion planting for the beans, I'm going to interplant with some nasturtiums. This is one pot of them, but actually there's 8 or 9 seedlings in there, so you can divide them all up. If you do this to a plant and you break the roots up, you just have to remember to water them really, really well immediately afterwards so that they recover quickly and grow. Now, nasturtiums are such a good crop because you can eat every part. The leaves are delicious, they're kind of peppery, a little bit like a rocket, and they're really beautiful. They'll sprawl across, they tend to self-seed, and they have orange or red or yellow flowers that are very good for pollinators, so all-round winner. Now, this time last year, Toby went to visit an absolutely beautiful garden in Shropshire.
The gardens at Wollerton Old Hall are one of the finest examples of a quintessentially English garden. They're set out as a series of rooms, each with its own colour theme and floral decor. Everywhere you look, it's picture perfect. But what I love most about this place is it has a wonderful sense of theatre. As you pass from one garden into the next, it's like going through a curtain on a stage. In this case, made from a green climbing hydrangea. But here's the thing, you're not quite sure whether you're in the audience or one of the players. A perfect example of this theatrical phenomenon is this, the yew walk. I mean, it could be a scene from Alice in Wonderland with roses and phlox frothing from the borders, dominated by these lofty yew pyramids. Now, these evergreens are spaced really cleverly, because as you walk down the border, the gaps between them foreshorten, and the trees themselves get lower. And that means that does clever things to the perspective. From the far end, it makes the border look longer than it is, while from here, it turns Lilliputians into giants. Evergreens are used so cleverly throughout this garden, and they're a type of plant that many of us only think about when everything else has gone to ground. But there's nothing like them for creating visual rhythm or giving a garden a sense of place. Now, this is box, and the longer you have it, the longer it's clipped, the more character it gets. Now, I know these plants have their troubles with pests and diseases, but they are so wonderfully tactile, particularly in summer, because it's got soft growth on the top and wiry growth below. Touching it is like giving a tickle to the belly of a very fat Jack Russell. And of course, if you want an injection of colour, what about this for an idea? Combine these evergreens with containers. Now, here they have tulips in the spring, white petunias in summer, and in the pots behind, paniculata hydrangeas to come. Because the garden is divided into rooms, it allows for the very playful use of colour. Now, these are the hot borders. It's a part of the garden that, thanks to the colour, feels full of energy and life. Now, there is a rule of thumb when using hot coloured flowers like these. You must never introduce paler shades or pastels, as we gardeners call them, because they can look lost and make the whole border look insipid. If you're going to have spicy coloured daylilies, fiery alstroemeria, it doesn't matter that the flower colours are different as long as they're of the same intensity, because it makes the whole not just look bright, but feel invigorating. The undisputed stars of the summer borders here have to be the Delphiniums. Now, of all the flower spikes or inflorescence you can grow, like it's foxgloves, veronicastrum or verbascum, Delphiniums have by far the most heft, and all the rest look, well, reedy by comparison. Apparently, Delphiniums get their name for the Greek word Delphis for dolphin, because on some of the varieties, the back of the buds look like the dolphin's snout. I don't know about that, but I certainly love the shape of the flowers. That's Pericles, a really well-proportioned flower spike. What I like about it isn't just the colour, which is so handsome, it's the tops of the flowers are white in bud, and that gives them a glow. Just a beautiful thing. A tall one for the back of the border is Nimrod. Dark purple, extremely vigorous and tall. But I have to say, if there's one in this border that really catches the eye, it's got to be Faust. It comes in two-tone royal purple and electric blue. I mean, it's so bright, it's almost iridescent. But when it comes to Delphiniums, blue isn't the only colour. Delphiniums also come in white and the most delicious range of pinks. Now, this is a variety called Clifford Pink, and isn't it a beauty? I mean, it's like crushed berries and cream. And it reminds me of one of those paint charts where you have the true colour at the top, and then as you go down the page, more white is added, and that same colour is tonally lighter. And because it's a mixture of pastel shades, it chimes in beautifully with all its other pastel neighbours, the Lysomachia and the Achillea at its feet. It just looks wonderful. It's partly helped because this is quite a diminutive variety, just at 5 feet tall, so works really well near the front of the border. But if you like your Delphiniums big, there's an art to making them supersized. My old gardening boss once told me that to get the best from Delphiniums, it's all about head and heart. They need their heads in as much sun as possible, and there wants to be as much good heart in the ground around their roots as you can get. So leaf mould, well-rotted manure, compost, you name it, put that in the ground before planting. And to get them as tall as this, you've got to thin the stems by getting a sharp knife and then chopping them away below ground. You can use those sprigs as cutting so all isn't lost. Because the thing is, the fewer number of stems you have, the taller your Delphiniums will be, because there'll be more energy going into each flower spike. So the rule of thumb is, on a newly planted Delphinium, just 2 or 3 stems. On a big clump, and this is 3 or 4 clumps together, you can get up to 7. Feed whenever you feed the pots on your patio, and they'll thank you for that. And then, as the spikes start to grow, add a stake. Now, this is a natty trick. These are staked with bamboo canes, but you'd never know because each one has been daubed with a Delphinium stem coloured green. Beautifully camouflaged, and then they're lashed together, held in a corral of string. And when your Delphiniums are happy, you don't just get one set of flower spikes. When these are over, if they're dead-headed and cut down to the ground, they'll bounce back for another mini-me show at the back end of summer. A lot of work, but worth it. There's colour around every corner here, and I love the way as you walk from one part of the garden into the next, a whole new scene is set out in front of you. It's very dramatic. Talking of which, don't those Delphiniums put on a show? In fact, the whole garden, what a wonderful performance.
Those Delphiniums look brilliant, and I know from bitter experience of trying and failing to grow them how much dedication it takes to get them looking so healthy. I've brought you some herbs.
Oh, lovely.
For many, many years I've been promising you to do a herb garden, haven't I? So this year I'll do it.
Okay.
So tell me what you want me to do.
I think I'd like to have culinary herbs.
Okay.
And I think I'd like to use this area here
When we first talked about this years ago, you wanted this to be like a seating area.
And also we do get people who are in wheelchairs, so I'd like it so that people can actually go around and have some kind of wheelchair access.
So the mint,
The mint.
does that want to stay? So you could get rid of it, or you could actually just carve a path through it. Because it's really nice.
It is really nice. It's Moroccan mint, so it makes lovely mint tea, but also cocktail makers use it.
Oh, that's really nice.
Because it holds its form, it doesn't go mushy. The flowers are lovely, and of course the bees love them.
Okay.
So that's important as well.
But essentially you want to have only pollinator-friendly flowers.
Yeah.
Or culinary herbs.
Yeah.
And I will come back in a couple of weeks and kind of lay this out and start clearing it and actually build this. But for now, shall I plant up your container?
Lovely.
Sorry,
That'd be fab.
it's not quite as dramatic. I've got here some basil that I just got from the supermarket, so about £1 for this pot. Normally, you take this home, put it on the windowsill, and within a few days, it's dead. And that is because this is so many little seedlings all crammed into one. So instead of planting it as one whole, here I'm going to fill this container with the individuals, breaking it up and dividing it, sticking it into the compost, then I'll have more room to grow healthily. So this is a lovely old washing tub that Jeanette had, and she's drilled some holes in, so it's got some drainage. But this basil doesn't actually like to be as dry as most herbs. This is more of a tropical plant, so actually it likes to be much moister and have a richer compost. So I haven't mixed grit in with this compost here. And remember that basil are annuals, so although you'll get a nice good harvest from them this summer, you won't see them through the winter and into next year. They're not perennial. So just pick them as much as you possibly can. Right now, as I have prized the roots apart and given them a bit of a shock, I'm just going to pinch off all these top leaves to alleviate them some of their stress, and it will allow them to bounce back a little bit quicker. And then when they do, they'll be branching and grow thickly and healthily. So that's a whole container and enough left over to do another one if I had one. But what you can also do is you can use supermarket chives, which actually are perennial and they are hardy. So I'm going to break these up and put them into individual pots, which will then bulk up, and then by the autumn I can plant them in the main herb garden and they'll stay there for years. But it's exactly the same principle. They're just little seedlings, and I'll break off just a few at a time to make a little clump very, very gently. There, little clump into the centre of the pot, and then fill it up again with nice rich compost, and that is it.
I do love culinary herbs, and when it comes to gardening, it's great to have a passion. For Peter Chan in Surrey, it's a laser-focused dedication to bonsai.
A bonsai is simply a tree grown in a pot, but it's not any old tree. It's got to be artistically shaped to resemble a fully grown tree that you would find in nature. They are living works of art. Bonsai are loved by people for two reasons. They either engage in bonsai as a hobby or pastime, where they actually can create and make bonsai and look after the bonsai. And there are other people who keep bonsai simply as works of art. They buy a beautiful tree and they just admire it. They don't do anything to it. They stay small for two basic reasons. If you keep clipping the trees, it doesn't get too big. So you can clip the growing shoots to keep them within the size you want. And of course, growing any plant in a container restricts the growth, and that in itself keeps the tree small. This tree has what we call movement. You see the lovely curly shape. It's almost like a dancing girl. The movement and the shape gives that powerful feeling and yet elegant beauty. This tree, I would say, would be approaching about 100. I've owned this tree for about 20 years. This is a Chinese juniper, and the variety is called Itoigawa because it comes from the Itoigawa region of Japan. It has small and beautiful, fine, deep green foliage. When you see a beautiful, curly trunk tree like this, it would have been shaped when it was very young using wire. And wire can create virtually any shape you wish. So if you look closely at this tree, you will find every single twig is wired in place. And the wires will create the shapes. And of course, once the shape is created, it will stay there forever. So these three techniques of wiring, trimming, and repotting makes a bonsai. You can make bonsai from virtually any plant. The common ones you come across in garden centers is this Chinese elm, but hobbyists will use conker trees, pines, maples. You name it, you can make it. So almost any plant can be made into a bonsai. I love my maples because they change colors. The spring color is different from summer color, and the autumn color is always spectacular. You can grow bonsai from seed like the maples we've sown here, or you can get large trees and cut them down and make it into bonsai. But whichever method you choose to adopt, they do require time. You can make a bonsai from any plant or shrub that you can buy from a garden center or nursery. This is a larch, which is about 5 or 6 years old. So I'm going to show you how you can do this very, very easily. The shapes are created by wire. So this is special bonsai wire, which is an aluminium wire coated brown so that it blends with the color of the trunk. We wrap it around the trunk tight, and I'm now going to bend it into an S shape. Provided the grade of wire is adequate, it will bend the tree into the shape I want. Then you put it in a pot like this, and we've got our classic S shape. And now we set about wiring the branches. So how easy is that? Classic S-shaped bonsai, and all it needs is a little bonsai pot. And we can put it in a plastic training pot like that, and you've got your bonsai. Watering is by far the most important thing to do for a bonsai. If you forget to water it like a pet, if you don't give a pet water, it will die. Same with a bonsai. As a rule of thumb, just make sure that the soil is never bone dry. Always keep it sufficiently moist. Feeding is also important, so a little bit of plant food once a month will keep it looking bright and green and healthy. What makes a bonsai attractive or beautiful? Like anything beautiful, it's hard to explain what beauty is. You can have endless debates about what constitutes beauty. But when you see something beautiful, look at this tree. It's got beautiful movement, it's got form, it's got character, it's got shape, and it immediately speaks to you. Bonsai was started by the Chinese probably about 2,000 years ago, and not by the Japanese, contrary to most popular belief. The word bonsai simply means a potted plant. Bon or pun means pot, and sai or su means tree. The Chinese have always loved plants, and they've always had a rich tradition in high-fired ceramics. So when plants and ceramic pots came together, the natural outcome was bonsai. Every object has a price tag to it, and bonsai are no different. So how do you put a price on bonsai? I have 3 examples of the same species. These are larches. The one I just made earlier is a piece of raw material that only costs like £3 to £5, and the little pot is about £5. So if you made it yourself, it would be only £8 in cost. And this tree here on my lap is about 45 years old and would probably fetch about £1,000. This tree on my right here was made by me in 1974 from an already established tree, so I'm very attached to it. This, if it were to go on the open market, would maybe get a couple of £1,000. Many people ask, how do you put a price on a tree? Is it the age? But really, the value of a bonsai depends on its beauty. If a tree is beautiful, it commands more money than one which is less beautiful. Age is an important factor, but age is not the only consideration. Same with people. If you're just old but not nice, you're not so likable or desirable. But if you're old and nice, everyone will like you and you're a much better person. Same with bonsai.
The more you know about a plant, the more fascinating it becomes and the more obsessed you become. These ornamental beds do look very beautiful, but they also have a function. Well, 2 functions actually. The first is that they can be used as cut flowers, and the second is that they are pollinator friendly. So I'm adding to all of these more perennial pollinator friendly flowers. Some plants Jeanette has actually been growing herself for this purpose, including the Siberian iris. Has obviously this beautiful flower which is very, very good for pollinators. But the thing about these irises is that when the flower's gone, the foliage slowly begins to turn a beautiful burnt golden brown colour, which will stay on all the way through the autumn. So they give really good autumn and winter structure. So that can go along the back and just break up the silver. This is a Rissamon bowls mauve, so it's a perennial wallflower is the common name. And they're really good performers in a cottage garden or a flower garden. They produce so many flowers which are loved by pollinating insects. They don't live for that long, but if you keep cutting them back in the spring before they've started to flower and then keep deadheading them once they are flowering, you'll get flowers for months and months. They need a sunny spot, that's all. This does look a bit bare now, but it will quickly fill out. And I want it to look naturalistic because this whole bed is very naturalistic, so I don't want it to stand out like a sore thumb and be too orderly. I'll divide this one into 2, I think, so you've got 3. There we go. Whenever you've divided or dug up and moved a plant, then you have to make sure you really, really firm it back into the soil and make sure there's good root contact, because if there's not, it's prone to drying out. Planting a Lychnis coronaria here, and in terms of design, the silver colour of the leaves will pick up on the silver of the cardoon, and actually Jeanette has grown these herself from seed, and that's what they do. They throw up beautiful pink flowers, almost glow with vibrancy, and then seed themselves all over the place when they've finished. And they throw up so many flowers that you really get your money's worth if you are using them for cut flowers in a vase, even if they only last for a few days each. I really can't think of a better place to be than this. Middle of summer, the sun's actually shining, and there are foxgloves all around me covered with bees. This is very much my happy place. Now, as well as celebrating all your own gardens, here are some other things that you can be getting on with this weekend.
If you have repeat flowering roses, it's a good idea to deadhead them as the flowers go over. Don't just pull off the spent petals, but snip the fading blooms right back down to a bud or leaf. This will encourage your roses to keep on flowering. Cordon tomatoes are best grown as single-stemmed plants. However, they grow vigorously and produce lots of side shoots. Regularly check your plants and remove any new shoots sprouting from between the leaf and the stem. This will allow your plant to put its energy into producing fruits rather than lots of new growth. Now is a good time to take softwood cuttings from plants like rosemary, sage, and lavender. Look for non-flowering new shoots. Make a clean cut just below a leaf node. Strip off most of the lower leaves and insert the cuttings straight into a pot of gritty, free-draining compost. Water well and don't allow them to fully dry out.
My mum made this and gave me some.
Did you?
So I thought I would bring it.
Oh, fab.
Pink elderflower cordial.
Oh, lovely.
There we go.
Lovely.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, that's lovely.
Thanks for the day.
Oh, thank you so much for coming along. It's been really good fun. I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I did.
Too much hard work.
Well, it's nice and sunny here, and it's so nice to see how much it's come on.
Yeah.
I remember coming here years ago, and it was sort of all these flowers that had been abandoned and growing wild all over the place, and like
It was
the
so
verbena where the
lovely.
veg was.
It was lovely. I so enjoyed those first early years when we were just peeling it back and look at this.
Yeah.
Look what I found.
Yeah, totally. But it's nice to be peeled back, and now you can put back in some of that wilderness.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for today. Next week, Monty's back at Longmeadow.
And that's on Thursday at 8 o'clock.
See you then. Yes, thank you, Russ. Yes, thank you, Russ.